It's him.
You would tell me the names of the bombers.
Give me the names of the bombers.
Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain The Foreigner. This movie tells the story of a businessman who seeks justice when his daughter was killed in an act of terrorism. Will he be able to find out who is behind the murder that happened to his daughter? Let's find out in The Foreigner. The Foreigner begins by showing a man named Quan picking up his daughter, Fan, from school. Fan asked her father to take her to a clothing store because she wanted to buy the dress she had wanted for a long time. Arriving there, Fan, who was already very excited to buy a dress, immediately rushed into the shop until she accidentally bumped into a motorcyclist who was about to leave the place. A minor incident occurred when Quan was about to park his car on the side of the road. His car accidentally collided with another car that also wanted to park there. Just as Quan and the car driver got out of the car, suddenly there was a massive explosion near the clothing store. Despite being badly injured, Quan tries to get up to find his daughter in the clothing store. The scene then switches to a news agency. Ian Wood gets an anonymous call saying that the Authentic Era, or Irish Republican Army, mentions the Code Phoenix was responsible for the bomb explosion near a clothing store. Through this phone call, Ian was also informed that the Authentic Era would continue its bombing campaign if the British continued to support the colonization of the Republic of Northern Ireland. Ian immediately reported the matter to his superiors, where the boss then ordered all his subordinates to find out about the Authentic Era. Ian then went to the site of the bombing to cover the incident up close. The explosion killed and injured many people. He pointed his camera to the side of the ruins of a clothing store where Quan was seen crying hysterically while hugging his daughter. The scene switches to showing a group of men watching a news broadcast about the bombing on television. One of the men looked worried and suggested they move out of the apartment. However, another man, who appears to be their leader, said they should stay here because the police would have tightened surveillance on the Irish after the bombing incident. Elsewhere, a man named Liam Hennessy is seen chatting with his mistress. Hennessy then checked his cell phone, where he got messages about the Authentic Era bombings and missed calls from his wife, Mary. Hennessy immediately called back his wife, who asked where he was, and he said he was in a meeting. Meanwhile, Quan, who has returned to his residence, is now mourning the death of his beloved daughter in his daughter's room. It was clear how much Quan lost his child and was determined to find the perpetrators of the bombing because he did not receive any information from the police about the bomber. On the way to his office, Hennessy gets a call from Catherine Davies, who asks him to investigate the bombing case and catch the culprit. To avoid conflict between England and Northern Ireland, Hennessy suggested to Catherine that he would involve his men to catch the terrorists who carried out the bombing. Catherine seemed hesitant at first, because Hennessy himself was a former member of the era, which would certainly raise the suspicions of the police. But Hennessy tried to convince her that he could fix the problem. Under pressure from the British government, as well as hoping to shore up his political position ahead of the Northern Irish Assembly election, Hennessy then held a meeting with former era officials to discuss the bombing case. He learned that the Phoenix mentioned by the Authentic Era was a code name they used to indicate that the Authentic Era's actions are supported by one of the former era members present in the room. Hennessy did not accuse anyone, but he tried to identify the bombers by investigating the explosives used by the terrorists. Therefore, he asked all former era members to provide a list of weapons and explosives in their possession. Meanwhile, at the Counter-Terrorism Command Office, Commander Bromley investigates CCTV footage around the bombing site before the explosion occurred. He suspected the movements of a motorcyclist who was in the vicinity of the clothing store before the explosion. While looking at another CCTV footage, he got a call from the office lobby saying that a Chinese man had come to their office 5 days in a row and asked to see him. It turned out that the man was Quan. Bromley finally met Quan, who still didn't give up asking about the perpetrators of the bombing that killed his daughter. Bromley seemed to sympathize with his situation, but he couldn't do much because he was still investigating the case. Quan bribed Bromley to get him to reveal the names of the perpetrators, but Bromley steadfastly refused the money and said he didn't know the identity of the bombers. Quan then left disappointed. Quan finally decided to investigate on his own about the Authentic Era, who was rumored to be behind the bombing incident. He intended to ask Hennessy about it, after he watched the news on television showing an interview with Hennessy, where he revealed that he was a former era member and confirmed that neither he, nor any other former era members, had any involvement with the Authentic Era that was behind the bombings. Quan then contacted Hennessy at his office and inquired directly about the bomber's identity, in which he suspected he was involved in the bombing. But Hennessy denied it and told him that he didn't know about the Authentic Era and who carried out the bombings. Due to another deadlock in his investigations, Quan decides to go to Belfast and investigate Hennessy further. He entrusted his restaurant business to Lamb, his friend and business partner. He then bought the things he needed and rented a room at an inn in Belfast. He went straight to Hennessy in his office and urged him to reveal the identity of the perpetrators, but Hennessy again denied it. Quan continued to think that Hennessy was somehow involved in the bombing, even though he stated that he had been out of touch with the era for more than 30 years. After leaving Hennessy's office, Quan then went to the building's toilet and assembled a simple bomb, then detonated the place. There were no fatalities or injuries as a result of the bomb detonated by him, but he threatens Hennessy that he will continue to terrorize Hennessy and his men if he doesn't reveal information about the bombers who killed his daughter. Hennessy then ordered his men to arrest Quan. One of Hennessy's men managed to track down Quan, who was renting a room at an inn in Belfast. After learning of Quan's whereabouts, Hennessy's men immediately raided the inn, but Quan managed to defeat all of them and fled. Hearing his men fail to catch Quan, Hennessy immediately became emotional and asked his wife to move to his farmhouse because his family's safety was starting to be threatened. Not only that, he also called his nephew, Sean, who is a former member of the Royal Irish Regiment, to help him investigate the bombing case carried out by the authentic era. He asked Sean to work with Bromley to catch the bombers. The next day, Quan stalks Hennessy, who secretly meets his mistress, Maggie, at a restaurant. He then spied on him making out with Maggie and took the photo just as they were kissing. He then sent the photo to Hennessy to threaten him so he could get information about the perpetrators. Elsewhere, Sean meets Bromley's commander, who suspects that the era was involved in the bombing. Sean couldn't deny his words because the remaining explosives found at the scene and the codename Phoenix mentioned by the perpetrators were all related to era. Sean said that one of the former era officials betrayed and supported the authentic era. Therefore, he revealed that every former era official will get a different code name. If there is another bombing and the perpetrator mentions a code name, it will immediately find out who has betrayed. They can immediately arrest the person and their bomber's partner. Meanwhile, Hennessy and his family, who have fled to the farmhouse, far in the countryside, are still getting terror from Quan, who apparently already knows his whereabouts. Quan hides in the woods, not far from Hennessy's farmhouse, and blows up the barn as a warning. Mary, who feels threatened, then considers the option of moving to another place, and stays away from Hennessy because she thinks that she will continue to be in danger if she lives with him. Elsewhere, the bombers were seen assembling a bomb in the shape of a laptop battery and planning to blow up a plane in which there were no Irish among the passengers. The scene then switches and shows Maggie meeting Ian Wood, a reporter who received a call from the authentic era, at a bar. The two seemed to be having a casual conversation and Ian seemed to be captivated by Maggie's beauty. However, unbeknownst to him, Maggie has prepared a plan for him. Quan again terrorized Hennessy when he blew up one of the cars, injuring one of his men. Hennessy then ordered his right hand to secure his family to the hotel, and ordered all his men to catch Quan, who was hiding in the forest. Quan, who had anticipated the attacks of Hennessy's men, could easily take them all down with the traps he had prepared beforehand. Despite receiving a gunshot wound to his shoulder, he managed to escape. Hennessy, who was at his wit's end, because Quan managed to defeat all of his men, then asked Sean to arrest him. Meanwhile, Mary, who has been secured in a hotel, is visited by Sean, where it turns out that the two of them have an illicit relationship behind Hennessy's back. After chatting with his uncle's wife, Sean gets a call from Hennessy to immediately deal with Quan so that he no longer threatens himself and his family. After that, Mary incites Sean to take Hennessy down. So far, it turns out that Mary hates Hennessy because the man ignored the case of her brother's death just to secure his position in the political realm. On the other hand, Hennessy investigates Quan and finds out that he is a former guerrilla fighter recruited by the United States Special Forces in Vietnam. He also learns that Quan's two daughters were kidnapped and killed by pirates while they were trying to escape Vietnam. After the death of his daughter in the bombing, Quan has no one else in this world. Not long after, Hennessy was approached by Hugh McGrath, one of the former era commanders, who asked Hennessy why his armory was being searched. Hennessy later told McGrath that the Semtex used in the bombing came from one of his dumps. McGrath denies knowing anything and claims that everything went according to plan. He later told Hennessy that he believed the bombings should continue and tried to persuade Hennessy to think the same. Hennessy said he did support the idea of the bombings but said they should only target financial institutions and not involve civilian casualties. Angry McGrath then insulted Hennessy and said that he now cares more about his career than the goals of the era. Hennessy then ordered McGrath to arrest the authentic era and threatened him by saying that if the bombers were not caught, then he would blame him for the bombing incident that killed many civilians. Shortly after McGrath left the Hennessy residence, Quan managed to infiltrate and corner him by pointing a gun and a bomb at him. Quan urges Hennessy to reveal the identity of the bombers. Hennessy, who also did not know the identity of the perpetrators, then asked him to wait because they had prepared a plan to uncover the traitors in the era who supported the bombings carried out by the authentic era. Quan agreed to wait for 24 hours and left immediately. On the other hand, Bromley managed to get clues about the suspected biker from the CCTV footage. The biker had a scar on his hand which was clearly visible in the CCTV footage. The scene then switches to showing Maggie, who had just gotten off a double-decker bus and approached a man who was a member of the authentic era. It was revealed that Maggie was one of them. Not long after, the double-decker bus that Maggie was riding on exploded on the streets of London and killed many people. Commander Bromley contacted Hennessy immediately after the second authentic era bombing, in which the terrorist group did not provide code names as in previous bombings. Bromley then urged Hennessy to immediately arrest the era's traitor or be held responsible and considered a traitor. Bromley then concluded that their plan, which only Bromley, Hennessy, and Sean knew about, had been leaked to the authentic era. Who knows? After getting pressure from Bromley and Catherine, Hennessy is now faced with another problem. His wife, who is known to be alone in the room with Sean for 2 hours and secretly contacts McGrath behind his back. Meanwhile, Bromley has identified the suspected bomber and is showing his superiors the progress of his investigation. The alleged perpetrator of the bombing was a man named Patrick O'Reilly, who was known to have connections to the era through McGrath, and the two had been seen eating together at a restaurant. Bromley then asked Hennessy about the whereabouts of O'Reilly and McGrath. Unbeknownst to Hennessy, it seemed that Bromley had been watching him and knew that McGrath had come to see Hennessy. Therefore, Bromley and Catherine offer Hennessy that he can escape all charges of being a traitor if he can get the names of the members of the authentic era who carried out the bombing from McGrath, who is on his way to his house. Hennessy then threatens McGrath to reveal the bomber's identity and is shocked to learn that Maggie's name is on the list. It turns out that Maggie and Hennessy's illicit relationship had been planned to involve Hennessy with the bombers if he chose not to support the authentic era's anarchist actions. Hennessy also discovers that the real mastermind of the attack is his wife, Mary, who hates England for the death of her brother, Patrick. She also hates Hennessy for allowing the killers to be sent to prison instead of killing them. In revenge for his betrayal, Hennessy shot McGrath fatally. On the other hand, it turns out that Maggie is approaching Ian because she will use Ian as a bomb carrier onto the plane, just as they had planned. While Ian was still asleep in his bed, Maggie got up and replaced his laptop battery with an authentic era homemade bomb. Meanwhile, Sean, who has gotten the bombers' names from Hennessy, manages to track down Quan's hideout in the forest. The two of them got into a fierce fight because they were former members of the trained special forces, but Quan was able to match Sean and hold him. Sean then told Quan the names of the bombers, and after that he was released. After being released by Quan, Sean returned to the Hennessy residence. Hennessy, who had known that Sean had leaked their plan to Mary when she had an affair with him, then ordered Sean to bury McGrath's body and kill Mary. After that, Sean had to go to New York City and promise never to return to England or Ireland. As the police and MI5 prepare to raid the London bombers' hideout, Quan enters the apartments of authentic era members disguised as a gas leak repairman. Suspicious, the bombers then intended to search Quan's belongings. When he was asked to reveal the contents of his bag, he immediately attacked the members of the authentic era and killed all of them except Maggie. Quan then left the place just before the police stormed the apartment and found a badly injured Maggie. The police then interrogate Maggie to reveal the location of the next bomb, which has been planted in the laptop belonging to a reporter Maggie seduced, Ian Wood. She was also about to detonate on the plane carrying several British officials to an international conference in Rome. With only seconds remaining, British police managed to hurl the laptop into an empty jet bridge, where the bomb exploded without causing any casualties. Knowing Quan was at the hideout of the bombers and who killed them, Bromley ordered his men to arrest Quan. Meanwhile, Catherine, who was scheduled to be on the flight targeted by the bombers, calls Hennessy and says that she has learned of Hennessy's involvement with the bombers because Maggie is known to be Hennessy's affair. But because Hennessy helped prevent the final attack, he would be allowed to retain his position as Deputy First Minister, even though he was under Catherine's full control. After killing the bombers, Quan infiltrates Hennessy's place and shows him a photo of Hennessy kissing Maggie. He then forced Hennessy at gunpoint to upload the photo to the internet, exposing his involvement with the authentic era and destroying his political career. After that, he returned to his restaurant in London and reunited with Lamb. Bromley and Scotland Yard commanders became aware of Quan's role in the incident and placed him under surveillance. After that, Bromley decided not to take any further action against Quan.